And because they want to be right on a matter, they don't realize it. They come into agreement with witchcraft to look for your downfall. Because they just want to be right. There was an argument and you thought you were right and they want you to be wrong. And because of that, in their heart, they want that thing to fail so that they can be right. It's called witchcraft. Witchcraft is every time you will something over somebody else's life against their will. That's witchcraft. I must be right. I left them. And because I'm right for leaving, they must go down. So when they go down, everybody will know that I'm right. But they're not going down. So you realize you're wrong. Judges chapter 6 verses 17 to 24. The first thing that Gideon had to execute was what? Getting right with God. The Bible said, then he said to him, Gideon said to God, if I have now found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who talk with me. Do not depart from me, I pray, until I have come to you and bring out my offering and set it before you. And he said, I would wait until you come back. And Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour, and the meat he put on the basket, and he put the broth in the pot, and he brought them out to him. And under the terebinth tree he presented them. And the angel said to him, take, eat the meat and the unleavened bread, and they lay them on the rock and poured out the broth, and he did so. Then the angel of the Lord put out the end of his staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and fire rose out of the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread, and the angel of the Lord departed out of the sight. How many people know the angel didn't eat it, but by doing that, what did the angel show? Acceptance of the offering. So the first thing that Gideon had to do was get right with God. I'm telling you, there's some hidden mysteries to this thing we call offering. There's some hidden mysteries. Anybody remember when David had sinned against God and a plague had come on the people, and he had to go to the field of Araunah, and the instruction for David was to go and build an altar and bring sacrifice to God. There is something about getting right with God and offerings. I can't tell you I fully understand all of the revelation, but I saw what Gideon was doing here to get God's heart to be with him. The Bible said in verse 22, now Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord. So Gideon said, alas, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. Then the Lord himself now said to him, peace be with you. Do not fear, you shall not die. So Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, the Lord is peace, Jehovah Shalom. To this day, it is still an offer of the birthright. Number one, get right with God. Before you engage, I bet you, please don't fight. Don't go fighting people if you're not right with God. What did I say? If you're not right with God, anybody you will fight will defeat you. That's why AI, small AI, the city is so small, the name is spelled with 2 letters. They whooped Israel. They whooped Israel because Achan had sinned. Israel was not right with God. Any little fry will whoop you if you're not right with God. Get right with God first. Don't go fighting. Praise the name of the Lord. Number 2, turn your back to every other God besides Jehovah. Break all unholy alliances and get rid of your idols. See, if you study the book of Exodus very well, you would see that God had warned Israel about the kind of stuff that could get them in trouble. You'll see it in a little while. In Exodus chapter 23, 30 to 33, the Bible says, little by little, this is God promising Israel now. He said, little by little, I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and you inherit the land. And I will set your bounds from the Red Sea to the sea, Philistia, and from the desert to the river. By the way, can you notice this verse in the Bible is the direct opposite of what ignorant demonstrators are singing. From the river to the sea, God said, I'm giving it to you, Israel. And the ignorant demonstrators will sing from the river to the sea, Palestine. So in other words, what they're saying is that Israel will be completely annihilated. It's the most foolish chant that you can chant because it will never happen. It will never happen because God is the covenant-giving God. God does not turn his back on his children when he has. Even when his children are wrong, he will allow them to be smacked for a little while, but that does not give you the power to think that's a permanent one. I remember when I was young, I used to hear my mother say this, that when a mother says, help me smack my child, it doesn't really go deep in their heart. Because if you start smacking the child, the mother will bite you. The mother can smack the child themselves, but they're not going to give you permission to beat their own child. Anybody know what I'm talking about? I was so naughty once in secondary school and I got a serious whooping. Now, for some of you, this was the time when we used to get whoopings in school. Not today where social services will be called. Teachers, it was what was called corporal punishment. The whooping was so bad, there was marks. When I got home, my mother was mad. The next day, she went straight to the school principal. I sent my child to school to learn. I did tell you to beat my child to death. Don't mess with God and Israel. He can allow Israel to be invaded. An October 7 event can happen because they've turned their heart away from him. They've become so secularized. They've become so liberal. Many Jews are liberal. They don't worship Jehovah anymore. Many Jews want to live like the rest of the Western world. And they can become uncovered for a moment. But because God allows them to be uncovered for the enemy to attack them and give them a wake-up call does not mean you become emboldened. Because Hamas did what they did from the south to attack and kill, Hezbollah from the north now decided after October 7 to start shooting rockets into Israel every day. They've shot over 8,000 rockets into Israel so far. I know if you're watching BBC, ITV, just forget all these news networks in this country. They're all liberal networks. They will never tell you the truth. All they will ever show you is little children being bombed in Gaza. Everything that turns people's heart against Israel, that's all you ever see. You are going to have to search for truth by yourself. Because all the stuff you see on BBC, Sky, it's all propaganda. It's making you believe what they want you to believe. And what Europe and radical nations of the world, liberal nations want you to believe is that Israel is a bully, Israel is nasty, Israel is wicked, and they forget to tell you they're one tiny little country surrounded by enemies. Stay with me. You turn your back to every other god but Jehovah. God told the children of Israel, he said in verse 32 of Exodus 23, you shall have no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in your land lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely become a snare to you. Can you see how God warned them? Now, listen to what God told Gideon he had to do in engaging. We're talking about steps to engaging the enemy. First, you get right with God. Second, you turn your back to every other god. What did God tell Gideon to do? Judges chapter 6 verse 25. Now it came to pass in the same night that the Lord said to him, take your father's bull, the second bull of the 7-year-old, and tear down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the wooden image that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on top of this rock in proper arrangement, and take the second bull and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the image which you shall cut down. Use the image as wood. Use the image, the wooden image they were worshiping. Use it as firewood. Verse 27, so Gideon took 10 men from among his servants and did as the Lord had said to him. But because he feared his father's household and the men of the city too much to do it by the day, he did it by the night. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that you may not know about Baal and Baal worship. Please listen to this very carefully. Baal had become a god that the children of Israel were worshiping. These are the same people that God told that you will worship no other God besides me. Now, how did that begin? Because the children of Israel had now entered into Canaan. And Baal was a Canaanite god of fertility and rain. Baal was a false god that the Canaanites worshipped because they believed Baal was responsible for fertility so that the woman can have babies. And Baal was responsible for rain. Remember how important rain is to these people. All of their farming, all of their cattle rearing, everything dependent on rain. How did the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, how the descendants of the people who saw the mighty miracles of God in Egypt brought out by Moses and Joshua, how did they end up worshiping Baal? Many people don't know this, but the appearance of Baal is an animal called the bull. The world globally is still in systematic Baal worship. Right in front of some major banks, you would always see a bull. As a matter of fact, when they talk about the market doing well, they'll call it a bull market. In the time of the children of Israel, Baal worshippers would gather around an altar and burn infants alive as a sacrifice, and then they would get engaged in bisexual orgies. That was how they worshiped Baal. So you got to understand, Israel had gone so far, they had become the enemies of God. How dare you, who have known God, end up in this kind of worship? Till today, anything that has to do with child sacrifice is Baal worship. Including nations that are in major support of abortions on a large scale. It's Baal worship. You know why Donald Trump is hated? He's hated by all of the forces of darkness because he picked Supreme Court judges that stopped Roe versus Wade. Most people don't know that in over 50 years of Roe versus Wade, over 60 million babies had been aborted in the United States of America. Again, Christians, you've got to become aware. It really, really affects me, particularly when I'm in America, when I get around Christians who are just so ignorant. They just tell them stuff in the news and they believe it. Oh, this one is racist. Oh, he's mean. Oh, he's that. And they just believe those things. They don't understand the spiritual consequence. No other American president had supported Israel like this one person. 50 years, everybody talked about it. They prayed about it, how to stop the reckless level of abortions in America. One man was the only one that dared to do it. They hate him with a passion, and they will do everything, assassination attempt after another, to kill him if they can't stop him from winning the election. So wake up. I know popular opinion is what many of us Christians go with, but popular opinion is not always right. It's not always right. So the first thing God told Gideon to do, go and take down Baal. Now you know now that this guy is looking for war. Anybody know what I'm talking about? He goes at night, takes down the image of Baal, take the wood and make the firewood, and then he builds an altar for God in the replacement. And that was why the Bible said in that Judges chapter 6, that in the morning, the people came and said, who did this? Who did this? Who burned the altar? And they inquired and discovered it was Gideon. Then they went and grabbed Gideon's father, Joash. It is your son that did this. We must kill him today. And God gave Joash wisdom. Joash said, but Baal is a god. Why don't you guys let Baal fight for himself? There's no need. And then they gave Gideon a name, Jerubbaal. In other words, the one whom Baal is going to deal with. But Baal never dealt with him. Rather, he became the general of them. You're going to have to turn your back to all the idols. What are idols in the 21st century? Everything that you choose over serving God. As your job become an idol, as your business become your idol, what is it that you prioritize over your worship of God? What takes priority over your personal prayer time and study time? What takes priority over serving God? I would have volunteered, but I can't take time off. Hey, one day you're going to close your eyes. And after you close your eyes, you're going to appear before his throne one day. And you will give an account. Oh, Pastor Danny, I don't have to be like him. They're just a little bit over the top. God, 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 church, church, church. I'm running my race because I want to stand in front of him with confidence. And I want him to say, well done, son. Come over here. You did well. What will be your excuse? What are you so busy doing that you have turned it into an idol because it now competes with God in your life? Somebody say Selah. Number 3, have undiluted faith. Have undiluted faith and total trust in God for victory. We're talking about steps to engaging the enemy. Before you engage the enemy, get right with God. And I told you, I said, number 2, turn your back to every other God besides Jehovah. Get to that place where you just say, you know something, God, you're it. I worship nobody else. Number 3, have undiluted faith. Remember when God started speaking to the children of Israel in Exodus 20, the first thing he said to them in Exodus 20 is that I am God who brought you out of Egypt. In other words, you guys, you better get your allegiance right. The first thing he said, Exodus 20 verse 1. And God spoke all these words saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Verse 3. You shall have no other God before me. In other words, God said your faith and trust must be in me. Period. I am your everything. I am your all and all. Jehovah. I am the God that is more than enough. In Judges chapter 6, verses 36 to 40, God wanted to teach Gideon how to have faith in him. Remember, Gideon said, where are the miracles that our fathers talked about? So just paraphrasing very quickly, what did Gideon do? He said, God, please don't be upset with me. If you are really sure that you're going to give me victory in this battle and you save Israel by my hand. Verse 37, look, I shall put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor, and if there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on the ground, when, the following day, then I would know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. Verse 38, and it was so, when he rose up early in the morning and squeezed the fleece together, he wrung out the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. That was how wet the fleece was. But the ground was dry. Then Gideon said to God, do not be angry with me, for let me speak just one more. Let me test, I pray, just one more with the fleece. Once more with the fleece. Let it now be dry, only on the fleece, but all of the ground, let it be wet with dew. And God did so that night, and it was dry on the fleece only, but the dew was on all the ground. And then Gideon said, aha, this is the miracle working God. I'm going to have faith in him. Somebody said, it's a bad thing to give a fleece to God. It's good. Every time I pray for the sick, I'm taking a risk. And I'm going to pray just for a few folks and some of the things that the Lord has laid upon my heart today. God has no problem with you testing him. He has no problem with it. One very common one where he says, test me. Some of you have read it in the Bible. You know what I'm talking about. He said, test me. You test me and see if I will not come true. Ladies and gentlemen, you then discover in Judges chapter 7 verse 3, the first disqualification for members of the Gideon's army was what? Faith versus fear. Judges chapter 7 verse 3. Now therefore proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart at once from Mount Gilead. And 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. It was an invitation for those who have diluted faith to get away from the battle. God is saying, don't engage the enemy if your faith is diluted. You see, if I read a bit further, you would see there was at least 130,000 of the enemy forces that had already gathered in Mount Gilead. Now, they're going to be on a ratio of 1 to 13. Each Israeli soldier is going to have to be taking on 13 of the enemy soldiers. What made the 10 wait after they had seen 22 leave? They had faith in God, faith in their leader, and faith in the mission. When people leave you, they've stopped having faith in either God or you or your mission. Why did the 10 have the audacity to stay? Because their faith was undiluted. Don't engage the enemy if your faith is diluted. I meant to say, 10 stayed because they had faith in God. That if this is how God chooses it, and some of you know the story, then God said, there's still too many. Let me give them a different test. Don't give them notice this one. This one is a impromptu test. Just watch them. Let them go drink water. Let's see the one that laps. Or let's see the one that are going to drink comfortably and take their eyes away from surveillance of what's going on around them. And out of that test, only 300 passed. Now the ratio for the battle is 1 to 433 soldiers. So each of the 300 Gideon's army must be able to engage in this battle and kill 400 guys each to win this battle. Some of you have heard me say this before. I'm not looking for crowd. Or not me. Forget me. What I want does not matter. God is not always looking for a crowd. God is looking for a Gideon's army. Some of you have heard me say, where each one of you has the capacity to influence 300 lives for him. God never, all through the Bible, you will never find one place where God did any mighty thing with a crowd. Never. God always looks for a man, a couple, a pair, a small group. He always, and then he will gather those who would believe in him, believe in that leader, believe in the vision, and then they go forward. Upper room, upper room, upper room. Some believed, some didn't. When it manifested, those who believed were there. Those who didn't believe were not there. Miracle center, miracle center, miracle center. Some believed, some didn't. Now it's manifested. Those who believed would step in it and they would taste it. 300 Gideon's army, 300 Gideon's army. Some would believe, some would not. How do you know? When you walk away from it, you stop believing in it. When it manifests, the armies will step together in the warfare. So God is saying, if you're going to engage, you must have undiluted faith. I'm going to give you 2 more because of time. Number 4, receive divine instructions from God on how to win the battle. You want to engage. You want to possess what is yours. You can't use the tactics of your mom or your dad or your forefathers or your friend. You have to hear from God. Sometimes what God will tell you to do may not make sense. Some of you have heard the story of Bethel Church in Redding, California. Bill Johnson was called from the church he was pastoring in Weaverville They said, Bill, we want you to come and take over this church. The church had 2,000 members. Bill went to God in prayer. God, what do I do? God said, when you go after the move of the Holy Spirit. Conduct the services with emphasis on worship and prayer and try to get the move of the Holy Spirit. Bill went down in obedience to God and began to do just that. Then they started experiencing people shaking in the meetings, people getting healed. And the devil hated it. Then the devil began to instigate the hearts of some of the people who don't like what Bill is doing. This church is already off track, and they began to leave him. From 2,000 members, it went down to 1,900, 1,800, 1,700, all the way to 1,000, all the way to 900, 800. It stabilized at 600. Everybody talked about Bill Johnson all over Redding, California and beyond. He's definitely missed God. This church has missed it. Then God took Bethel Church from 600 to 6,000. Always seek God for your strategy. Let God work. Let Him be in charge of your marriage. Don't try to do stuff your own way. Let Him be in charge of your career. Ask Him for the strategy. If there's one thing I'm teaching my adult children now, all of my children are now adults, and I'm teaching them how to just do life on their own, and some of them have major life decisions to make. I keep teaching them about one thing. The faith of mommy and daddy carried you for so long, but you've got to hear God yourself, including my youngest one. Every decision I say, well, you're going to have to pray. Well, you're going to have to hear God. Oh, Dad, I just wanted to call you. I'm thinking of changing this course. I'm trying to do that. I said, is that what God said? It's almost like, oh, he started again. I knew that's what he's going to say. Is that what God said? Tap somebody next to you, say, is that what God said? Because the instructions of God does not always make sense to people around you. God's instruction to Bill Johnson, that church now has gone on to touch millions of lives. Many people know Better Worship, Better Church. The music from that church has gone all over the world. Leaders raised from that church are evangelists all over the world. So much of the culture of Bethel Church has influenced all over America. But when they were doing what God told him to do, people thought they had missed it. When you are doing what God tells you to do, don't always look for every family member to give you confirmation. 2004, when the Lord said, leave Bank of America, sell your house. It was the first house that my wife and I had built. We moved into that house in 2003. I was so proud of that house. Because in those days, there was such level of financial resources available. We got the largest lot in our estate. Our house was the largest tower that they built. And God said, give it up. It made 0 sense. The house I live in right now is like half the size of that house in 2004. Family members thought I was crazy when I was packing my bags to go to America. God said to go and start a church. Daniel, have you started a church before? No. Who is there waiting for you? Nobody. Do you have any family in that city? No. Do you have any congregation? No. Do you have any church denomination that is going to help you start? No. I just know God said, go. When we're giving away our furniture, people thought we had definitely lost it. Out of the properties we owned, the only property that did not have a tenant was a 1-bedroom flat. We moved our whole family to the 1-bedroom flat. My children were sleeping on the mattress on the floor. Dad, what are we doing? Jema was 7 years old. Gia was 5. What are we doing? I said, hey, God is taking us on an adventure. But if I did not move, I would never have discovered the purpose of God for my life. And all the lives of the people that was blessed in Medford, Oregon for 8-9 years, it was the obedience. The last one is you get up and fight. Let's rise up together this morning. You see that number 5 is get up and fight. Have you noticed? I gave you 5 steps. But before you get to the fight, you must first do the 4 steps. Can anybody tell me the 4 steps again? Number 1, get right with God. Number 2, turn your back from any other God. Number 3, undiluted faith in God. Number 4, receive your instructions. And number 5, then fight. You know one of the secrets about number 5? That fight is actually not your fight. That fight is God's fight. How many people know that the 300 guys with Gideon could not have defeated the 130,000? But after they had done everything they were supposed to, including the unusual instruction, God tells Gideon, go into the camp of the enemy. Gideon goes to spy. Then they hear 2 enemy soldiers. One said, man, I had a dream and I saw this roll of barley. The thing just tumbled into the camp and bulldozed our tents. And the other one said, this has to be nothing other than Gideon and the army. God is going to give them victory over us. And Gideon heard it. And God said to him, now, you go tell the 300 guys, get lantern and trumpet. The most senseless war strategy. Is this a war strategy or is this a death wish? You want to fight war. Now you're going to have a lamp so the enemy can know where you are. That's not even bad enough. Then you blow a trumpet so they know exactly where to shoot the arrow. What kind of instruction is that? But now they had faith in God. They had faith in their leader. And they obeyed the instruction. And God gave them victory. But this is the last thing I want to say to you. In Judges chapter 6 verse 13. Gideon said, where are the miracles? I heard the Spirit of the Lord say to me early this morning, the reason why I've told you, KFMI, to press into me in worship and believe to move in the supernatural is because you will not win your battles without it. As a church, we're going to have to pursue holiness. We're going to have to pursue prayer. We're going to have to go into deeper worship so that the presence of God can come be with us. Because we need the manifest presence and manifest glory of God. There has to be healings. There has to be miracles. There has to be signs. In these last days, there has to be wonders.